This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. And before I even begin, I have to offer an apology because I try not to make judgments upon things that I haven't seen. Oh yeah, and you'll notice that I do that with DCEU movies all the time because I have seen the bulk of them. And for various reasons, for differing reasons, they're crap. I won't pay to see that in theaters. But in any case, I try not to make judgments on things that I haven't seen. And with 2017's Inhumans, it was panned everywhere. I don't think I read one review that was complimentary to that series. So there's only so many hours in a day. So I didn't watch it. And I assumed I dodged a bullet with that. But I've seen the first episode titled Behold the Inhumans, and it was pretty good. It wasn't great by any stretch. Marvel Television is known for being kind of tight with the money. Being that Ike Perlmutter oversaw it, that's not a shock. But in any case, they don't like to give up the money. And you see that in Humans. Some of the sets look chintzy. Medusa looks kind of silly. Her whole costume isn't very well done. And it doesn't look expensive. But oddly enough, it looks cinematic. It looks very much like a movie, visually speaking. For something that was supposed to be as groundbreaking as Inhumans was, remember they worked with IMAX to film this, it was supposed to have been much better than what we got. But the first episode is not bad. As I mentioned, it doesn't look very expensive though, and I've heard estimates of somewhere like 10 million per episode. Don't know how true that is. I haven't had anything verified. But for a series as expensive as it supposedly was, it should look the part. It doesn't. The story is also rushed. In the first episode, the whole groundwork has been laid, and the royal family has evacuated to Earth for various reasons. Now, this is obviously because it would have probably cost more to shoot on those sets than in Hawaii. That's where episode 1 ends up. And it doesn't look significantly better than an episode of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And that's its biggest downfall. But in terms of being watchable and attractive, it works pretty well. I mentioned earlier that it looks kind of cheap. That extends not only to the production design, but also some of the makeup effects, like Triton, for instance. If you recall Triton from the comics, he is essentially a fish dude. I mean, I'm not talking Aquaman fish dude. I mean, he has scales and everything. He's like a fish. And in the comics, Terrigenesis was more altering. You not only got abilities, but it tended to alter your physical form as well, in drastic ways at times. So that's kind of been cut back, because again, they're cheap. But it's still quite watchable. As I've mentioned, I've only seen the first episode. This could go just so downhill, but it's not bad. Now keep in mind something. It all goes back to money, because the sets, as I said, look kind of chintzy. Some of the makeup effects, not that great. But also, this was written by Scott Buck. Scott Buck wrote another Marvel television show, and that was Iron Fist. The worst received Marvel television show, and somehow this is reason to give him another. But I have a theory. I suspect Scott Buck was very efficient in the sense that he could write it, he just crank it out and get it out there very quickly. And that's what I think they wanted. Less so a great writer or someone with a better record on these shows than someone who could just crank it out. And that even stems to the director. If you read any of the reviews about this movie, part of the reason he was chosen in the first place was because he can produce relatively quickly and cheaply. And that's the genesis, the pterogenesis, if you will, of the problem with this show. It's just so miserly with the money. I can't speak for anyone else, but 10 million sounds like a lot of, or whatever it is. It just seems that they're just so cheap. And it shows on screen. The show is for the most part well acted, but some of the costumes and props just look real chintzy. And that's a pity, because this is not bad. I mean, I get the feeling that a lot of the people who panned it because Marvel, and Marvel's doing so well, so you got to rain on that parade somehow. And this was just an opportunity to do so. It's just not terrible. I'm going to put a link to the first episode down below. If you haven't seen it, take a look at it. It's genuinely not terrible. In fact, it's not even bad. It's just kind of, And the thing is, it needed to be more than that. It needed to be more than passable. It needed to be more than tolerable. It needed to be good. It needed to be great. And it's not. But it's not bad either. It's quite watchable. And the story it's putting forth, a kind of imperious royal family, the downtrodden who don't have powers, or at least relatively minor powers, it's an interesting dynamic. But I learned all that in the first episode. Why this is not spread out, keep in mind, this was a miniseries. The whole story should have been the fall or the exile of the royal family. That should have been the entire story. All the first season of this should have been that. Instead, what we have is all that happens in the first episode. And the rest of the time is spent, I assume, tracking down the royal family. So, though overall, it's not bad. The way it was described by some people, I thought it was like the most terrible thing I've ever seen. I'm expecting, I don't know, a Zack Snyder movie. And it's not that. It's actually pretty decent. If you haven't seen Inhumans, as I said, I'm including a link down below. Check this out. It's really not that bad. Though the problem is, it should have been much, much better. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Peace.